now, so you all know where the facilities are down the hall. Just a reminder, your per diem forms, you should have them, and if you don't, make sure you get those filled out. Or Laura will tackle you before you. Commissioner Beal will share a little bit of news when she arrives, and then why don't we quickly go into item number 2. Well, before we do, is there any other items not on the agenda that the board would like to bring up for this meeting? And on the agenda will be as printed. Item number 2 is minutes from the September 28th meeting.
And we're being recorded.
Oh, you're being recorded now?
Yes.
We should probably also do introductions too. Just because I do notice we've got a lot of people online and a few extras in the room here today. Who started? Why don't we do that? I'm going to start online with our 2 board members. Catherine, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Catherine Robbins Halstead, Public Board Member, Searsmont.
Morning, Mac.
Mac Hunter, Public Member from Amherst.
Mac's starting to look a little bit like Grizzly Adams.
I was going to say.
He's gonna have to go to Santa Claus.
It's a
Jim,
legacy
why don't
of
we
my
go to you?
trip down the Grand Canyon.
There you go.
Jim Norris, public member from Winthrop.
Roger Burley, public member from Cliff Island.
Steve Walker, LMF director.
Pat Kelleher, DMR Commissioner.
I'm Judy Canuso, Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife.
Barbara Trafton, public member from Brunswick.
Bob Myers, public member from Bath.
Great, welcome everybody. We do have, we've got 15 people showing, 15 or 18 people showing online and a few people in the room, so I'm not gonna, too many to do introductions of who else is here, but you can see on the screen who else is participating. And with that, we will go to item number 2, which is the minutes. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes?
Haven't seen them.
Haven't seen them.
I never got it.
No, never got a packet.
It came on
Came
in
online.
SharePoint. So, yeah.
Okay. We can withhold approval of the minutes, or you want to withhold approval of the minutes?
Yes.
Let the record reflect that several board members did not see the board packets that came in online. So we will review and approve the board meeting, the September 28th board minutes at the next meeting. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. With that, we'll turn it over to our executive director to do fund balances.
Okay, I've never understood this slide, so can we skip this one? Here we go. There's the beat. You can see right here, active, sorry, I'm a little punchy this morning. Active projects, you can read them there. We got 40 outstanding with $19 million currently in allocation. And we'll go now by fund. Our conservation and recreation funds. We're looking at around 12 to have a little over $6 million. And when we get deeper into the agenda, we'll talk about potential timing for that round, especially as rulemaking and other complicating factors. Next. Working farmland funds were $1.5 million that are going to be available and unallocated. So still some room there. And if anyone has questions, slow me down, that's fine. Working waterfront, likewise, $1.7 million left in that fund. And water access, 1.6 million remaining that is not currently allocated. So still some money to play with, but we're getting down to the end of the 40 million.
Is that right? Like the 4th year that we're for the end of the, seems like just yesterday.
2021.
Yeah.
It was quick.
Yeah, that's what it's
done.
Okay, any questions on any of that? No questions on fund balances or allocation status. So with that, we will move right on to projects to be acted upon.
First, let's look at project updates. We did close a couple recently, both Muddy River Forest and the first phase of Edwards Mills. We have a whole pile of them stacking up possibly for the end of the year, but likely moving into January as well. Some of those will be discussed today, and then 2 that have been withdrawn.
Any questions on any of those? None, seeing none on the screen, we'll keep going.
All right, Laura is up with this new water access project.
Yeah, the first project to be acted on in this meeting is a new water access proposal along a tidal inlet of the Back River in Arousick. This is a proposal by the town of Arousick, and we have both Feeny and Jack from the town of Arousick's Conservation Commission online today. It's a 2-acre proposal with over 300 feet of frontage, as I said, on a tidal inlet of the Back River in Arousick. And it would be the first formal public boat access site on the Back River and on Arousick Island. The exact plan has yet to be determined, but there's possible development of a ramp and float and or the hardening of a launch area. There are several existing buildings on the property which would be removed once acquired. But there is a barn that the town may decide to leave for storage. And it is worth noting, although not part of the LMF project, landowners across the marsh have committed to donate the property from the center of the stream to the proposal to the town of Arousick. That would benefit the property, even though not part of the LMF project itself. And just this morning, an MNAP report, so this wasn't in the board packet, but an MNAP report was received this morning. And here is a map for you to review from that MNAP checklist. The proposal is in the Kennebec Estuary focus area. So the total project cost, and this is land value only, not counting the value of the buildings, is estimated to be $120,000. There's an appraisal underway. The LMF request is $60,000.
Just to put the motion on the table, Mr. Chair, I would move that we accept the Back River Water Access Proposal as a finalist with a preliminary allocation of 60,000, subject to standard LMF conditions.
Second.
Motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger. Are there any comments or questions on this particular project? Can you go to the first slide and show me exactly where this is?
Sure, and there even is a better map in the packet that I could pass around if that would be helpful.
You could just pull. It's just the bridge.
Yes. That little orange section there. Hard to see.
I think it's a little further south on the island, though.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Moving a little mouse around it.
To point out where it is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is the southern tip of the island and Georgetown
Yeah.
Island here.
Yeah, okay.
Would another map be
No,
helpful?
I
I
can,
can
I
just
can,
pass it around.
there's another map in the packet. I didn't notice it, so I'm fine with that.
Jack Whitman from town of Arousick. The 127 bridge is just below the legend on the left map. It's right about where the cursor is now. You can see it where it goes across, cuts off the Route 127, cuts off the salt marsh there.
Yeah. Okay. A motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger. Is any other questions? Seeing no other questions, is there any opposition to the motion on the table? Seeing no opposition either online or in the room, the motion passes. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Talk about how excited I am to use it.
Can I ask him, have you seen the stellar sea though from this?
Yes.
area?
One of the stories is that it spent one night in the pine tree just above the house. And it's where, there's right on 127 on the bridge there's thousands of cars parked there. So if it comes again, I'm sure people will be using this site.
I was one of those cars.
I was too. I saw him.
Okay, welcome Commissioner Beal. We're gonna call on you after we finish this round of approvals.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next project.
Still with Flora, Square Lake, Cross Lake.
So this project, which you remember from round 10C, approved by the board on September 27th of 2022, is over 4,000 acres in Square Lake Township in Aroostook County to be acquired by BPL with over 5 miles of undeveloped shoreline, selected by the board as a project of statewide significance with a major land asset of water access. It's coming in front of the board because due diligence revealed that the project does not have a specified public right of access as required by LMF standard conditions. So BPL is requesting that the board waive this standard condition so they can proceed with the purchase of this property. Just to remind you, a final award of $890,000 was confirmed in March of this year, and this is about 35% of the property value. And BPL hopes to close by the end of December or early January. And so I don't know if you can see this map very well. Hopefully you can. The red outline is the property itself. The yellow line is the road, access road leading into the property. So the property itself and the number of camp lots along the lake are benefited by a right of way for all purposes of a traveled road or way leading from Route 161 to the property. This right of way does not clearly provide for access by the general public as is required by the LMF access policy. The right of way, that access road, is located on lands owned by Allagash Timberlands, which is associated with Irving Woodlands. Irving currently permits the public to use this existing access road, but notably, Irving does not agree that the public would have the right to use the road if the state were to acquire the property. And so BPL, who is represented here today by Bill Patterson, also Nat Rosenblatt is here today. He's been working as LMF and BPL's attorney, and Jerry Bly has also been working on the project. So a number of people have been working with Irving since early 2023 to secure public access to the property. However, Irving, the real issue is that Irving seeks indemnification, and the state is unable to provide that. In concept, Irving has agreed to grant a right of public access, subject to withdrawal if Maine's recreational use statute is reduced or repealed. So this is something that's in the works, but it's unlikely that an agreement would be in place before the project needs to close. And also, even with that road use agreement, there still is a possibility that the recreational use statute could be reduced or repealed. So it would still need to come in front of the board regardless. And lastly, worth mentioning that if the LMF board votes to fund this project, BPL has indicated they would continue to work to secure deeded public vehicular access to the property and would report to LMF annually on the status of these efforts. And I know, unfortunately, not everyone saw the board packet, so there's quite a bit more information in the board packet, but it is worth noting that some of the discussions surrounding the Kennebago public access issue with mitigating sort of conditions, the AG's office, although not specifically asked about this project, the AG's office has told LMF that the board doesn't have the authority to require sister agencies to capture obligations in a binding agreement. So this looks a little bit different than the previous discussion for that reason. And the exact same slide as was presented when you discussed Kennebago, but the LMF workbook requires that all lands acquired with CNR funding be open to the public. And LMF seeks guaranteed public rights of access whenever possible and has sometimes withheld funding because of access concerns. However, LMF has also funded some projects without this guaranteed public access, and it's a case-by-case decision made at the discretion of the board. Some possible considerations here for your review, and both I and the whole BPL team are happy to answer any questions you have.
Could somebody go into a little more detail about the indemnification question and the recreational fund?
I think this would be a great question for Nat Rosenblatt.
No, happy to, and I'm the lawyer who's been working on this project, assisting both the Bureau and the board. The issue, and it comes up with some regularity. it's not unusual for when a landowner agrees to permit someone to cross his or her property, whether it's an individual or the public, to require that, okay, you can do that, but you must indemnify me if there are any claims associated with that. And in private transactions, that's sometimes agreed to, sometimes not. The state, the line is very clear. The state cannot indemnify. And there are several reasons for that, which we can get into, but so given the state's inability to indemnify, the question is, well, what else can the state offer? And in these discussions, the discussions sort of follow a recognizable pattern. The state is asked to indemnify. The state says, sorry, we can't. But look, you've got all these protections under the recreational use statute, which does protect landowners in the event people are injured traversing their property. And then the landowner replies, well, yes, but of course the legislature could always change that. And so what has evolved, and we've seen it both in transactions that the Bureau has been involved in, as well as some private transactions. What's evolved, at least in some places, is a provision that says public access so long as the recreational use statute remains basically as it is. But in the event that those protections are degraded or eliminated, there's an ability to turn off the public access. And hopefully that would create an incentive not to mess around with the recreational use statute. But again, that's up to the legislature.
Has the recreational use statute ever been monkeyed with?
Constantly.
Okay.
I think in ways that are, I don't want to generalize too much, but I think in ways that generally are protective of landowners. So the scope of activities currently covered by the recreational use statute is broader than it originally was. And it covers things like people walking in and walking onto property and collecting Christmas trees or other sorts of vegetation like that, not commercial activities, but just walking, doing those sorts of things. So I think in general, the changes have been helpful for landowners, but you just don't know. We can't predict what a future legislature might do.
Laura, could you also perhaps talk about the water access? Because I think our public access isn't just vehicular. It's any kind of access, right? So it could be by foot or it could be by boat, and certainly the islands that LMF has protected. And as I understood the memo, there is public access here by boat about a half mile away. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, that's right. And well, you can't really see, but there is a public boat launch about a half mile away across Lake. So on the eastern side of the property. So there is water access, guaranteed water access in that form. Yes, quite close by.
So it would appear that, they spoke to one type of access when they were submitting their application, but they never mentioned they had public access vis-a-vis the water. But that would qualify for our definition of public access.
I just had a question. What happened with the Great Northern right of way that was deeded back in the 60s? Has that just been eliminated, or?
I'm happy to respond to that. No, it's very much still there, and that's what we'd be relying on going forward. That 1961 easement exists. Flora paraphrased it in the slide. It doesn't quite say it's for public access, but it does talk about for right of way for all purposes. The question of what all purposes means and whether that includes public access, that's sort of the gray area, and that's where people have different views on that. But that easement is still in effect. It provides the access to the property now. It provides the access for the 50+ camp parcels that are along the lake. And so we're certainly not losing that. And in any negotiation, we don't want to get too much into it, but in any negotiation, certainly we would seek to preserve that easement. We're not going to give that up. And that will continue. Any sort of arrangement regarding sort of boosting and making the public access more secure would be on top of the 1961 easement.
And my other question, Irving has agreed that they would grant that unless that Title 14, Section 159A was repealed or substantially modified.
They've indicated, and I don't want to get too far out on a limb, they've indicated that conceptually they would be okay with saying the public can use the road, agreeing the public can use the road so long as the recreational use statute remains as it is, with an escape hatch in the event that it's degraded or repealed. There are some other issues which we have not resolved with Irving. I think they're all resolvable, but that's where we are in our discussions with them.
I've probably testified on every bill that tinkered with that law in the past 20 years. And no matter who's in charge, I see very little willingness to modify or certainly not repeal that in any way.
Nice to know that we have a resident expert here. Roger.
So my ignorance here, or blind spot, but if there's access by water as opposed to access by road, is there an ADA issue here? Have we talked about this before?
I don't believe it would, we've never had ADA compliance issues that have been triggered by, I mean, so an island would be a good example, right? I mean, so I can't think of any that, it would be one thing if we were then gonna provide access, constructed access. That would be, I think, a very different conversation. Yeah.
Thanks.
This is all still going to be part of the conversations and due diligence, correct, for the project. So I think we'll see the continued conversations on negotiations to finalize language.
Well, realistically, if there is going to be an agreement with Irving, that won't happen before the closing. It would not, no. Yeah, just realistically, it won't, given the time constraints we have to consummate the transaction. That won't be feasible. But certainly, the door has been open to us to continue the conversation with them based on the conceptual agreement that they articulated to us.
Okay, thank you. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move to continue eligibility. Again, project.
Second.
Well, here we have two draft motions. So, go ahead.
I move to confirm funding for the Square Lake Cross Lake project with existing access.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Camuso, seconded by Robert Trafton. Any questions or comments from the board? Phil?
Yeah, when I first saw this, I thought this was clearly distinguishable from Kennebago discussions, but fortunately today, I see the likelihood of this being successful is pretty high, and that, again, the risk isn't acceptable, an acceptable risk for me, so I'm certainly going to support.
Right.
I just want to clarify that I feel it does have public access, and that's why I'm voting for it today to continue. Do I think it's desirable that you continue to work on vehicular access? Yes, but I don't feel I'm waiving anything at this point. I'm just voting that they didn't specify the legal access that they did have. They went with the road that they need to clarify.
Right. Any other questions? Any online? Seeing none online, none in the room. Is there any objections to the motion to confirm funding for the Square Lake Cross Lake project with existing access? Seeing no opposition either online or in the room, the motion passes. Great, thank you. And moving on to item C, 5C, Kennebago project merger.
Yep, this is essentially a housekeeping item. We have the two Kennebago projects, Headwaters and Woodlands, which came in round 10A and 10C respectively. And now that we have a clear path to closing, it looks like they're both going to be ready to get their LMF money at the same time. So in the interest of simplifying our lives going forward, we thought it would make sense to combine them into a single project encompassing both parcels. So because this is a change to parcel configuration, it does require board approval. And there is a draft motion there for your consideration.
Questions to Jason on the merger of the two Kennebago projects? Seeing no questions, does anybody like to make a motion? Roger?
I move that we merge the Kennebago, approve the merger of the Kennebago Headwaters and Kennebago Woodlands projects into a single Kennebago Headwaters project with a final allocation of $1,700,000 subject to previously approved conditions.
Second that. Motion by Roger, seconded by Jim Norris. Any questions, comments? On the room or online, is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition either online or in the room, the motion passes. Point Bay.
We have a couple more of those two late breaking items that I emailed out yesterday. Yeah, these should be very quick. The first one is the Roberts Farm Homestead, which is a fee ownership by Western Foothills Land Trust with BPL as the designated state agency. They just realized recently that there is an error in the legal description rather than it's a part of. There's an area that's reserved from the legal description of the project agreement, and they accidentally described the reserved area rather than the encumbered area in the legal description. So it's a very simple corrective amendment that again just needs board approval to go forward. And with the board's approval, I would then work with them to make sure that all the boxes were checked and everything looked good before it was recorded.
I move we approve the corrective amendment to the legal description in the Roberts Farm Homestead Project Agreement.
Motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger Burley. Any questions or comments on the motion? Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections either online or in the room, the motion passes. Thank you.
And one more before we get back to your regularly scheduled agenda. So the East Grand Western Conservation Easement, this is a courtesy notification from BPL. This is not something that requires board action, but there is a right of way leading to and through the easement area that the owner of the land and the abutter wish to move a little bit, and BPL has considered that request and plans to go along with that, amending the legal description within the conservation easement a little bit. Again, no board action required, just a notification so that you are aware of what's happening on the LMF funded property.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Jason on that? Seeing none, we'll get back to our regularly scheduled program.
And unfortunately, the public notice went out with the meeting time is 10 a.m. and it's still 10:30. The public notice said that we would be accepting comments at 10. So
if any comments come in after the time frame, then they should be brought to the board's attention to see if it would change our determination of our final decision.
fantastic. Okay, great. So the next project is the McCoy Bay Sherwood Conservation Recreation Project in Brunswick. It's 32.1 acres, fee acquisition by Brunswick Topsom Land Trust within the McCoy and Middle Bay focus area of statewide ecological significance. Over 1,300 feet of shoreline and 6 acres of a wetland of significance in Maine. It also abuts IF&W's Gamble Marsh Wildlife Management Area. The AOC met on November 7th of this year to discuss the McCoy Bay Sherwood project appraisal. And the appraisal reported a value of $540,000. The committee accepted the appraised value. There's a draft motion.
Any questions on the comment or comments on the project? Would you like to make a motion?
I move to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $540,000.
That's right, back on track. So this is a committee motion, does not need a second. Is there any comments or questions on the motion? Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections either online or in the room, the motion passes.
You sound like a recording.
Just keep pulling the string in my back.
Notice for the McCoy Bay Sherwood project was advertised in the Kennebec Journal and Portland Press Herald on November 17th of this year. No comments were received in draft motion here.
Or anybody like to make a motion?
Yep, I'll move to confirm the allocation of $245,000 at Conservation and Recreation Funding to support the acquisition subject to standard conditions.
Second that.
Motion by Roger, seconded by Jim Norris. Is there any questions regarding the motion? Seeing no questions, no hands. Is there any opposition to this motion? Seeing no opposition in the room or online.
That's different.
The motion passes. Thank you. Great. Moving right along then to Laura.
It's me.
Beats.
High Peaks Keystone Orbiting Parent Stream. Beautiful photos. I mean, wow. And here you have the details. You can see, this is the map on the right here. You can see all the multiple parcels that are part of this project. The gray parcels are all the match parcels. They've been approved. Their appraised value has been approved. So they're coming through in this first phase one. They're going to need to phase this project, by the way, because they need to close some of these first two parcels early. The parcels that are to be acquired in this phase are the two bottom in red, the Bruce Puffer parcel and the Griscom Residuary Trust parcels. Those would be accepted if you accept the appraised value, and all of the parcels in gray are part of this phase one acceptance. You can see how much it improves connectivity. You can see the other BPL projects right there. And there is a place in here with late successional forest and small old growth area on some of the steep slopes. Pretty impressive. And this one is queued up. If you all approve this today, my job today includes making sure I push the button down for procurement if all due diligence has been satisfied to the satisfaction of our council. And here you have the breakout, which is really so much smaller than I remember it being. The change here, there's a change in acreage. The Bruce Puffer parcel in your materials, we thought it was 758.5 acres. The surveyor made an error, so it's been reduced to 739.5. The appraiser has submitted a letter saying no change to the appraisal. I'll let the Appraisal Oversight Committee have anything more to say about that. They have all indicated, well, I'll let them speak for themselves. And the Griscom Residuary Trust on the top, 164.5 acres. The important thing, the reason you have this chart here is to see the phases, everything highlighted in the top. These are the ones the values you're approving. And to see how far ahead in match we are, they're asking for $1,066,000 for this first phase. We would be entitled, based on these values, to give them as much as 1.5, a little over 1.5 million. That catches up a bit because the second phase, we're going to need to use some of that excess match to acquire the parcels later in 2024. The ultimate match percentage will be, this project will be 53.5% match value when all is said and done. Any questions about that? Somewhat. Okay, good. And we have a draft motion.
I just want to congratulate Laura on this chart.
We were much about the chart at the meeting.
Later on that?
Oh, yeah.
About something else.
It's key to sealing the deal. And I'd remind the Bureau of Parks and Lands, if they ever come to us again with a project that has 7 separate appraisals. There may be some issues in getting it approved.
Yes. So we do have a draft motion there, if anybody's in the mood.
I will turn it over to the AOC chair.
I move to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee to accept the appraiser's value of $3,116,000 combined for all the highlighted parcels.
Committee motion does not need a second. Is there any question on the committee motion? Seeing none, is there any opposition to the committee motion? Seeing no opposition online or in the room, the motion passes.
Okay. All right, so here we did announce the public notice. It was advertised in the Kennebec Journal, Portland Press Herald on November 17th, and we did not get any comments. So we prepared the draft motion to confirm this allocation.
Move to confirm the allocation of $1,066,000 in conservation and recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
Second.
You have a motion by Bob Myers. The second was snuck in under the wire by Roger Burley. Is there any questions? Seeing none, is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition online or in the room, the motion passes.
Thank you. And I should be clear, we're hoping to close this in January, early January, get the stuff queued up now in January.
Great.
Oh, am I the next? I'm the next. Oh, yeah.
The big one.
DEA report. So this is a tome. This is my picture of a tome. It's huge. And you can't get your hands on it. So, so it's so big. It's not just coming from me to you all. It's coming from our entire department. There are a lot more people who have to lay eyes on it and make sure it's good before you get it. I promise you'll get it. It is, and one of the things, well, I'll save the suspense. I'll let you read it. I don't want to spoil the plot. Yeah, it's long as about 64 pages, give or take, depending on which ones you count.
It's 80-something pages.
Oh, is it really? Commissioner Beal,
You're doing a really nice job of not naming me as the person in right now. Currently the bottleneck, but I can tell you, I'm more than halfway through it. It's an excellent read. You're gonna love it. Yeah, I really encourage you to digest every word and every.
Well, thank you very much. So
There's a hardbound copy.
I'm gonna want the first
This is
edition
signed first
autograph.
edition,
So that is our GA. I'm sorry that's our GA report. Thank you, Commissioner Beal.
So I think,
Oh, sorry.
And that's due December 15th.
December 15th to the committee.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, the board would normally review and adopt. So in this case, when we do get this, if you would please submit comments to Laura as quickly as you can after you read the 80-something pages. Then we can deal with, dispense with the GA report, Barbara.
I just had a question. In this report, it mentions the various funds that feed into LMF, and it mentions Conservation Land Management Fund. Is that what I've always known as the Access Improvement Fund?
No, this is a new creation of that 2021 bond.
2023.
What's that?
2023. This
2023, you're right, thank you. Yeah,
So just,
so it's a new animal.
Brand new.
could you talk about that a little bit?
I think it's commonly referred to as a stewardship. Isn't that where that falls out, or is that something different?
No, I think its roots were in when we were going to do this mitigation funding. It's a brand new animal. It's not funded right now. Right
Okay.
now, our funding is all very, very clearly distributed between the 4 programs you saw the reporting on. This, I hope, becomes a way that we can get funding to more people. The criteria being that it must, these lands must be permanently protected in some fashion. But hopefully, and in the rulemaking, our proposed rulemaking, we said lands that were or would be permanently encumbered, so they could come to us simultaneously, hopefully, and get this funding for capital improvements for, help me, Jeff.
Access.
Infrastructure like trails.
Infrastructure,
Yeah,
yes.
For
I'm
wildlife
hoping-
habitat management.
Yes,
Created in LD 1969 this year when we transitioned LMF into a trust fund and we created this new.
yes.
Yeah.
I hope we can expand it a little bit to include infrastructure for working waterfront recipients because they currently get bupkis for any kind of capital improvement. They're the only ones.
Is this the bill though that was specifically around impacts to wildlife habitat from?
No, this was LD 1969 that took the Land for Maine's future money, put it into a new account.
Okay.
Then we made some changes to the statute, including creating this option for the LMF board to create a grant program, as Laura's describing, that would allow the board to fund infrastructure improvements like trails and water access, like boat launch sites and things like that, or wildlife habitat enhancement projects.
Pretty
So
exciting.
there's no funding for it, but we created the opportunity for the board to create something like that and then find funding in the future.
So I'm still wondering where our access improvement funding is. Is that in here?
That
That's
is,
a capital improvement.
that's a function, Barbara, of our existing CNR. That's always been part of our statute.
Okay, it just comes
Yeah.
under the CNR.
Just broken into different.
Okay. This is broader than access improvement then because
Would be available to lands that are permanently conserved, whether they're conserved by Land for Maine's future or not.
large is our opportunity. Okay. But it has no money at this point.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so GA report will eventually be distributed.
Yes.
And I would ask the board members again to just make sure you do it. I will ask you to send comments directly to Laura, or if you have no objections, to send to Laura, and we can try to dispense with it quickly that way. I think we can do it fairly informally.
Approximate kind of when we can expect to see it, so we have a little time to review it before it's done.
Yeah, what does it do?
December 15th.
December 15th.
Yeah,
So
soon.
no pressure, Commissioner Beal.
Yep.
Late night.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we, considering that we'll have it probably by the end of the week.
I think by the end of the week,
We'll have
because
next week.
there will be
for-
some-
Next week for the board to review and have comments by Friday, a week from this Friday to Laura.
Yeah, there will be some,
Yes.
to incorporate before you sign back out. So.
Yeah, definitely. I assume there would be revisions.
Not many.
Cool.
So Commissioner, I assume that you have read this at this point, and I wondered if there were any riveting highlights that call to our attention.
As I said, I'm halfway through it. I mean, there have been we've made a lot of decisions as a board in the last few years, and I think they're really well reflected there. It's just a very transparent sort of depiction of all the work that we've done and all that we've accomplished. So,
It's a great history of the program.
yeah.
And hats off to Laura for taking this bull by the horns.
Well,
It turned into more than any of us thought it would, I think.
it's a long story there. It should have been, I should have taken this bull by the horns quite a bit sooner than I did, but hey. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we will just have comments. I don't know what the day is next Friday, but a week from this Friday, comments are due. What's that?
December 1.
December 1.
Right.
Well, Brian,
Yeah.
we
So
have
it's a week from December, yeah, yeah. Okay, all right, let's move on to rulemaking.
Oops, sorry. I guess I should stop using that. And you,
All right, also, something that sort of came out of, at least our awareness came out of LD 1969. Since, I believe, 2011, this bold sentence up there has appeared in statute. The rules adopted must go through technical routine rules as defined in chapter blah, blah, blah. So when the Assistant Attorney General brought that to our attention a few months ago, we all scrambled, having not gone through rulemaking for the program yet. And we're able to draft the rules that were in your packet. I apologize to those of you who didn't see the draft rule, but in summary, we tried to do a general statement about procedures of the board by statute, as directed by statute, a description of the various funds, including the Conservation Land Management Fund that Barbara just brought up, and then a description, general description again of the criteria used by the board under each fund for making grant awards. We didn't want to get down into the gory details of how many points are allocated to which criteria. Instead, we reference what we're calling the annual program statement, which will be your workbook, as updated each year. So hopefully, and right now this draft is in the hands of our Assistant Attorney General who's looking at it. If it passes muster there, and if you are willing to officially initiate rulemaking at this meeting, then you can see in this calendar of events, there's all these set milestones which take us out approximately 3 months before we can start awarding grants or voting to approve funding applications. I'm hopeful that that doesn't mean we have to stop work on the workbook. I see that as something more procedural that doesn't affect how we are directly awarding grants, but gives us that time to prepare for the next RFP process. So rulemaking would be done by the time we issue that RFP or by the time applications for funding start coming in. So trying to do 2 tracks at once, but it is a long process, including a public hearing, which Commissioner Kelleher informed me we can do that remote, which would be nice. A public comment period following the public hearing, and then basically finishing it up and hopefully not having to go back through rulemaking anytime soon. Did I miss anything, staff?
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Steve? So this is new ground we're plowing here for the LMF, establishing rules. This process is, I won't even say cumbersome, it just takes time to go through. It takes roughly 100 days once you go through the review process and opening it up for public comment. The good thing about the rulemaking process is if we, in the process of determining, we missed something through the rulemaking process, as long as we have comments and as long as it is not a substantive change, we can make some tweaks to this before final adoption. Once all of the comments have been given to staff and for the board to review. So in this case, we're initiating and we're approving. So it gives us a little bit of latitude in the process. So the question is to the board is.
Just a question, and,
Yeah.
and Steve, you mentioned that because it references our LMF project booklet, that every time we work on that, that does not initiate a new.
That's our hope, yes.
It's a hope.
That's our hope. What we did is we took the general criteria that are in statute now and used those to form the rule. And then that would, once we go through the process, hopefully with this annual program statement, i.e. the workbook, that'll get us, as long as we're not drastically changing criteria, it'll give us the flexibility to move the numbers around, but still have the criteria that are in statute now. If we do anything significant to the workbook and introduce new criteria or new ways of doing something, that might, I'm not the Assistant Attorney General, but I would imagine something significant would trigger additional rulemaking.
Who is your PEG?
Lauren Parker. Unfortunately, she's out with COVID right now.
So the question of the board, are you comfortable with initiating rulemaking? We'll see final product, the final draft, the draft that will go to the final.
We have a choice, do we?
Not to stay on
Required
the
of
time,
us.
not to stay on this timeline.
Well, we have to.
I think the key piece of this will be if you see something that is problematic, or if we discovered something that is problematic, that we make sure that that is clearly put into the record by a member of the board or a member of the public. That way we can make those changes. Can make small changes, like as long as it's not a substantive change that will change the entire makeup of what the rule is. If something that drastic was done, then you would have to go back and republicize and go through the process again. So if we're just making small changes, like that's pretty doable. And I think what Steve and Laura and I talked about this earlier, I think, I agree. I don't think this at all, is going to impact the timing of the workbook and the criteria for reviewing. The bigger question, I think, what you brought up is, do we have to do rulemaking every time? And I don't think that will be the case based on the conversation. That I think this will be a, something that we try to make as broad as we can, so the workbook can continue to move forward without additional rulemaking.
That would be my concern if we were triggering, rulemaking every time we do a little
Yeah.
nothing. And so when you say if it's not significant, in whose mind would that be?
Forward.
Yeah,
I would
so,
say
yeah, so and in talking to our, hopefully I'm not going too out of school here, but in talking to our Assistant Attorney General, she basically, when we were framing this out, her basic advice was, what does the board see as taking risks? So outside of what's in statute now. So if it's something the board sees a major change, then I think the Assistant Attorney General would advise the board for their comfort level and minimizing exposure to go through rulemaking. If it's just standard annual tweaks in the workbook or clarifying things like we just did with the public access portion of the workbook and some of the changes you'll see later this morning, that's, I would imagine, would not trigger additional rulemaking.
Matt, can I see your hand up?
Yes, I did have some time to go through it, and I agree with the way it's being characterized as being general enough that every little tweak to our process will not invoke a change to it. But things might happen. I'll give one example. I recall there was some talk about climate resiliency as a factor to consider, and 10 years ago that wouldn't have been part of our thinking. So change may well happen, but I'm not worried about it being something we have to revisit every year.
Great, thanks, Mac. Is there any objection from the board to move forward with rulemaking? With no objection, I think I don't think we need a full motion to start the process. We'll just let the minutes reflect that the board has discussed the process and the board agrees to initiate rulemaking with the understanding that we will have the opportunity to review and comment and if anybody, again, just a reminder to the board, if there are any red flags that you see, please identify those very early in the process so we can make sure they're clearly part of the public record. Okay, great, thank you. We're gonna move right along to item number 8, which is CNR round 12 workbook. Deal with changes.
So once again, apologies to board members who were not able to review the proposed round 12 workbook. I'll go over some of the changes briefly here. There is both a clean version and a red line version that was sent to you, and we can resend it if needed. Largely, the changes were updating policy to reflect current board policy and general cleanup. So in section 1, like I said, it's policy and procedure adjustments. 2 notable changes. We are proposing adjusting the signage policy in response to land trust requests to have the ability to use a digital sign or to incorporate a digital copy of the LMF sign in their own signage, as long as certain size is maintained and as long as staff signs off. So one change there in response to requests. And then also proposing allowing proof of capacity in the form of land trust accreditation instead of financial documents for those accredited land trusts. Section 2, the Conservation and Recreation Fund section has some proposal process and proposal format changes, largely cleanup. A working forest definition was included because that was requested quite a bit. We needed one. And a few scoring criteria adjustments as well. a request from the board to clarify population centers. That was included in the scoring. Climate change resilience was revised to specifically include marsh migration, something that staff noted was missing in previous rounds or just kind of got left out from time to time. And then last but not least, accessibility. That section, this is difficult to read, so don't even try, but that was updated to reflect the new public access policy. The only reason I'm highlighting this here is because if you reviewed the red line version of the workbook, you'll note that number 5, a category for 5 points wasn't noted as an addition, but it has been added here, is proposed to be added here, which would allow 5 points for a property accessed by a private road that provides access for passenger vehicles and is open to the public, but public access is not guaranteed as defined by LMF in Appendix H. So for a project like Square Lake, this would provide a Square Lake type project with 5 points. Wanted to highlight that since it wasn't noted as fact
Can you
changes.
go back to that?
Sure, yep.
Property is accessed by a private road that provides access for passenger vehicles.
That's impressive. You can read that.
So maybe that's why they invited us, also I can read.
I can tell you the page number too for other people.
Is if you're walking, I guess that's, you know, does it have to say passenger vehicle?
I think the idea, and I'll let Jason chime in as well, but I think the idea was that vehicular access is called out in statute. And for these projects where vehicles can go
Yeah.
in reality, if not guaranteed legally, there might be some value in those projects. So that was the idea there.
Okay.
And the item above it that's also 5 points is access, is guaranteed access by foot.
Yeah, right, it's broken out into 2 pieces. Okay, I get too focused on the box.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Proposal process and format is of the main water or access to main waters section of the workbook. We also in section 4, we redefined, or we defined standard conditions in section 4 of the workbook as standard conditions and next steps. It felt like those pieces were there, but they weren't super clear. So we tried to clarify that. And for the appendices, the project agreement templates in the workbook were updated. The new public access policy was inserted. Access improvement grant fact sheet was updated, and the stewardship awards policy, which Jason is going to talk about now, is proposed to be inserted.
Okay, stewardship policy, which we've talked about a few times since it was initially authorized in 2021. So one of the hangups in adopting the policy to make these stewardship awards is the challenge of making awards to state agencies. We now have, there's a proposed statutory change that would allow awards to be placed into a trust fund or stewardship fund for state agencies. Until that goes forward, we are proposing that we adopt a policy applying just to cooperating entities, getting those out the door. The policy is in the board packet. If you didn't see the board packet, it's the same policy that was in the September board packet. But the key points are just establishing the award amount, which is the same amount that has been used for access improvement. And then that the match requirements, that this will be captured, the requirements will be captured in the project agreement. And we will, once the policy is adopted, we will then finalize project agreement language with the Attorney General's office and propose a process for retroactively making those awards to every project that is closed in round 10 or 11. Going forward, we'll be able to make those awards at closing. So I'm happy to field questions on the policy itself, but there's also a draft motion there to adopt the policy. I think because this is going to be backwards looking as well as forwards looking, that's why it's put out as a separate motion, not just as part of adopting the workbook.
No, actually-
Foreshadow.
Actually, we jumped over the access one, and that's where my question was, and I guess, I'm not really sure about 5 points for no access, whether that is with no legal access, if that is a fair distribution of points and how we see these projects. And so let me just raise the larger issue. I am aware that, because we've struggled with this on a number of projects, that some of our partners and stakeholders are trying to put their thoughts together to share with us, hopefully. But I wonder if we don't need a larger discussion around public access going forward. So I'll just lay that out as, I think all stakeholders should have the opportunity to weigh in on public access, whether they're from a land trust in Scarborough or York, or, a land trust or an entity that deals with big parcels. But public access is, we're pretty much divided on this board as to how we see it. And I'd like going forward for us to have, a broader discussion about that before we get into the heat of individual projects. So I'm not sure that I'm totally in line with.
So you would want to delay the workbook?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
But what I'd like to say is that at your discretion, Mr. Chair, I think there's a bigger discussion that we could all have on this issue. But I certainly don't want to delay our next round.
Okay, I appreciate that clarity. I agree that a broader discussion on access is warranted.
Put this on an agenda.
Yeah, I think we could add this to, you say partners are looking at potentially submitting something to the board for?
Right, it's my understanding that, some stakeholders.
Yeah,
Are looking at this issue, but it should be all stakeholders who
right.
have the opportunity to be involved in this discussion, as well as members of the board. So I want that larger discussion.
Yeah, I think we should really put some thought. I agree with the idea of having a conversation around this. I think we should put some thought into how we want to organize that kind of a conversation to ensure, to your point, that we get all points brought to the table for us to consider. Catherine, I see your hand up. You've been waiting patiently. I know this is an issue of yours, or topic of yours you'd like to discuss. So let me go to Catherine and then we'll come back to the board. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I agree with what Barbara said. I have raised several times that I have a problem without guaranteed public access, but I would not like to delay the issuance of this so that we can get projects going along. But I'd also rather put this issue to bed so that we're not each time, as Barbara had said, revisiting every project and the discussion of public access, because I believe it's the core of LMF to have guaranteed public access. And I've said each time that I'll bring that up. So it's something I'm feel pretty strongly about. So I would like us to have a good discussion on this at a later date and receive input from the public. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate all those comments. Anybody else?
I would just say, because it's fresh in my mind, reading the GEA report, it does lay out some of the what's in statute around this issue, and what's in statute contemplates that it might not always be possible.
Yes.
So I think that it would be good to have a bigger discussion, but also to be considering what is our charge in statute.
Yes. I would recommend that we maybe between now and the next meeting, talk about what that conversation looks like. Agree to the kind of the overall approach as far as entering into a conversation with our stakeholders on access, and then schedule it for the next meeting. That timing all right? Okay. Let's get back to the approval of stewardship and workbook. But I would thank Barbara for bringing that up, because I think the time has come to have that conversation. Jim Norris.
Yeah, would this be able to be accomplished with staff, or would there need to be board approval?
So I think the way it would. So if the board adopts the policy today.
Yeah.
Staff would then work with the Attorney General's office to get the project agreement language done. We would come back to you with a proposal for, couple of proposals. One being to have some process for projects that have closed recently to apply for these funds. Two being to, to amend some of the existing allocations to include stewardship funds. And then when projects that have already closed apply for the funds, that would need a board vote to allocate those funds. I think we would do it, you know, probably as a slate of approvals, similar to what we do with access improvement. And then once the funds are awarded, there's a little bit of process that needs to happen to, you know, to get the money, to confirm they have all the required documentation, get the money out the door. But the involvement of the board would be first agreeing to the process and then actually making the awards.
So would anybody like to make a motion on adopting the stewardship awards policy?
I'll move to adopt the stewardship awards policy as contained in the board materials.
Second.
Motion by Judy, seconded by Bob Myers. Is there any questions? We'll not have to do rulemaking around this.
I think that falls into that, well, it'll be included in the workbook. And then which, yes.
Good answer.
And we did include stewardship funding in the draft rulemaking now, so.
Yeah,
it
all right.
Won't be
Okay, great, perfect. Any questions on the motion? Matt?
Whoops, sorry, I raised my hand too quickly. I have a question about the overall workbook that I want to get to when we're done with the stewardship.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that. So is there any objections to the motion to adopt the stewardship policy as contained in the board materials? Seeing no objection online or in the room, the motion passes. Now we will go back. No, not back. Now we will go back. Now we have a board action for the round 12 to adopt the workbook.
And a few last things about the round 12 workbook. The proposal establishes a single request for proposals for CNR projects of both statewide significance and community conservation. Inquiry forms due January 19th of 2024. Final proposals due March 22nd, and then May 14th and 16th of 2024 board scoring and selection. And one other thing I want to mention, we're going to get to it at the end of the meeting, but one change in the workbook was that only one hard copy of proposals would be coming in. So if you want to change that, wanted to flag it.
Laura, do you want to back up a slide so we have the motion on the workbook before
It's done.
we do it is done.
Yeah, there
You combine them, all right.
But before I go to you, I'm gonna go to Mac because he's
Sure.
waiting
Yep.
for.
Yes, in the overview of the changes, it was mentioned that we now have a definition of working forest, but I'll be darned if I could find it. I see an appendix G, guidance for working forest easements, but it's that, anyway, I can't find a specific definition of a working forest easement. Where am I going astray?
The working forest definition, I can find the exact page. It's closer to the beginning of the workbook. I can give you an exact page in a second. Oh, what we did, just without looking at it, what we did was try to pull from the community forest program definition of working forest, just so we had a little bit more clarity as to what sorts of projects we're looking for in that type of RFP. However, in this workbook, we have one round for all projects of all sorts, including working forests. So it's not called out specifically like it was in round 10 and round 11. I'll get you that page number, 1 second.
While she's looking for that page number, Mac, I'll go to you, Barbara.
Well, Laura, you sort of raised this, but I'm assuming if only one copy comes in, that somehow you're planning on distributing that to us electronically. And given today's
Right.
problems, and you've been very kind to help me continue to get into your phone as a hotspot. Well, it's gone dead again.
Oh, no.
You know, it's so critical that we be able to
Yeah.
read the materials before a board meeting or be able to read the proposals. So I'm concerned about those two things, but,
But I was actually gonna raise this issue at the end as a question back to the board. Because we have always used hard copies with this board, and we have switched now to the SharePoint, which we have board members who did not either get a review or however that happened. I know I'm a hard copy kind of guy. And I think if the board would prefer hard copies, we need to flag that now, to ensure that everybody has what they need. If a board member is fine with SharePoint or getting attachments, then we can maybe split it up and get hard copies to some and SharePoint for others. So think about that. And let's come back to that at the end, so we can give clear direction to the staff.
Wait till
but it goes to the other issue about the proposals coming to us too.
Yeah,
So
I think it's all tied together. I think it's all tied together,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I know,
those are huge.
yeah, they are huge. We've done it before, in hard copy, but some people don't like hard copies, right? I mean,
But the other issue, Mr. Chairman, is that it would appear that if we want to bring, you know, it with us,
Yeah.
we will each need some kind of an account because it was asking for a username and a password for me to get in. So that would have to be resolved if we're going to do it electronically, if we want to have it available to us while we're in the room.
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna throw it back at staff to help try to rectify that.
Yeah, can we, because of all, the number one thing on many applicants' wish list is please stop making us have to create 11 hard copies of everything. And it's kind of ridiculous. I don't mean, but this is a serious problem, that if we could get something set up for Wi-Fi so people could access their Wi-Fi here, that would help. And also, how much can we staff, we should talk about it, if we can say to applicants, just one hard copy, which will come here and be displayed, and then we know as staff, somebody needs a hard copy, maybe we take the step. I don't love that either, but really hate to put it on applicants.
Did they give you an electronic?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, no, that would be a
Be
requirement.
required.
Jim.
So was our SharePoint provision simply because a lot of the files were so big, so cumbersome that couldn't send them electronically?
Email them, that's exactly right. That's what SharePoint was designed to get around.
But this round, everything was emailed as an attachment and also uploaded in SharePoint. And I will just mention back to Mac's question about working for us, it's on the overview section in section 2.
It may not
Did you
leave
get
out
that,
as a
Mac?
definition, you know what I mean? We talk about it. Yeah, yeah. I
Yes,
was-
I did. Thank you. Now, yeah.
Okay, so let's come back around at the end of how we're gonna get materials, because obviously it's important that everybody has these materials in hand and has time to review them ahead of time. So that's gonna be a key piece going forward, but we'll take that up under other business at the end. We have a workbook schedule. And you've got a couple draft motions for the board to consider putting up.
To adopt the LMF workbook as contained in board materials.
Motion by Judy, seconded by Roger. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition either online or in the room, the motion passes. Robert.
I move we issue a 2024 request for conservation and recreation proposals as outlined in the round 12 work.
Motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger. Is there any questions from the board? The only question that I have is back to staff, is to ensure that with all of the due diligence that has going with every other project that we've approved and the timing of this round, I want to just make sure from a workload standpoint that we're not gonna kill you
Quit.
in the process, because I mean, we have moved a lot of projects forward and we have a lot on the table on the due diligence side to get ready for closing. So this, in my mind, I thought this was coming in the spring, and that's why I'm asking this question now.
It was discussed to be pushed back, and there was a feeling at the staff level that consistency was important. And so issuing the RFP at the same time as previous rounds was important. But certainly, we do have some draft dates that are a few months, pushed out a few months, if that would please the board.
We also were taking note that if we pushed it out, the selection meetings would be in the middle of June. And we didn't think anybody wanted to do that, including staff.
There you go. Okay, that's the only question that I had. There's a lot of work ongoing, so I just wanted to make sure we're flagging that and we're all recognizing that. Okay, any other questions? Is there any opposition to the motion to issue a 2024 request for conservation and recreational proposals as outlined in the round 12 workbook? Seeing no opposition either online or in the room, the motion passes. We have no complaints from staff.
Oh, we'll complain. Grown.
Great, thank you very much. The 2024 calendar meeting.
Proposed dates, hopefully you can see them all, and there is flexibility as needed, but here, we took a stab at it.
Yeah. Yeah, right now, I mean, I think we always have the flexibility to make some changes going forward, obviously giving proper public notice.
Can we weigh in? about
Absolutely.
your dates?
Yeah, please.
I would love to see January 23rd moved a week ahead to January 30th. And thinking of the staff, of course, the letters of inquiry come in on the 19th. This would give them just a little bit more time to look those over so that we could have a more thorough discussion of those at the 30th. Of course, I also have to admit that I will be out of country as of the 20th.
That's brilliant.
That means I will be, if we did move it to the 30th, I'd be available. Right now, I will be not available on the 23rd. I'll be in Washington.
So all the better.
Yeah, I was keeping my mouth shut, just trying to.
You know, I know.
Is there any objection to moving January 23 to January 30?
No, but I will just say, we haven't totally confirmed when our legislative committees will be meeting, so
Yeah.
that could end up impacting us.
Yeah.
But we'll let you know when we.
Right now, it's good.
And you do have the flexibility of sending someone in your stead.
Soon. Okay.
We gave you that.
Not yet. After this legislative session.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's make that one change, and with the understanding, as Commissioner Beal said, we may have our oversight committees make some changes to our legislative schedule, so that could impact it. But for now, we'll go forward with what we have here. And before we move to item number 10, updates from staff, I would like to do a quick update with Commissioner Beal.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is Steve's last board meeting with us in this capacity. I expect.
Yeah,
we'll
hopefully
probably-
I'll, yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably see you on the other side of the table at some point in time, but thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, it's been great working with you and
Likewise.
really want to just wish you the best as you're going into another really exciting opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And I do have an announcement to make. This is so hot off the press that it really was just finalized like 30 minutes ago. So this next thing and waiting to get final word from HR, but I can announce that we have selected a new director for the program. Usually we like to give like staff a little heads up, the board a little heads up and not do this quite so publicly, but I think it's the question that is on people's minds. I'm excited to say that person is in the room right now, and that is Laura Graham, and we're just.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Vale. Thank you.
Well, Laura's been such an asset and again, just wonderful working with you, and I know you're going to do a great job. Very excited to move you over into this seat and.
Actually, my office.
Thank you.
I think I would have objected if she weren't chosen.
And thank you, sir, for getting the rulemaking off the plate. Who knew?
You don't know the landmines I set
I
up.
don't. I never. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, let's move right along to staff updates then.
All right. The first on the list was the trust fund management update. I think this stems from a question Barbara raised. We did go back to the controller's office, yada, yada, to figure out what our flexibility is there, and there really isn't any. The good news is we're still getting interest at a little over $100,000 a month, but we are tied into the state's requirement. We can't just go on public investments or things of that nature. So it's pretty much set, was my understanding. Office specialists, I don't know, did that answer your question, Barbara?
I guess the corollary to that, and I guess we have no control over that, is you can throw out a number, but what's the percent interest that we're getting on our fund? Because is it market rates that you would get in the market, or?
I don't have that at my fingertips. Do you know, Laura?
No, and I can't do that math fast enough.
Right.
It's about $102,000.
Yeah, I think it-
Essentially 34 million, as I recall, that's
Right.
there. So what would that interest rate be? 3.4%? So I don't know, that's probably not right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody,
More than we've gotten in the past. I can certainly get you the hard number and send that out to you.
Just curious. If we have no latitude to.
We have no latitude because of the way the legislation's written, or is that the only way the legislation could be written? Did you get a sense from all of that?
I think you'd have to have expressed authorization to have some outside entity manage the fund.
We should consider that maybe in the.
Yeah, I can't think of a corollary in state government, but they're,
Pastor,
Baxter, okay.
it's just a quasi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we had funds that have come into our agency that they're shared with BPL for stewardship funds, actually, but it was a donation that went into the main community
Okay.
trust foundation, main community foundation. So, I mean, and we do a lot better than those numbers that were just read.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate, that answer. I'd like to continue to look at it because,
Certainly main
it's
community.
real money on the table here.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah, having the ability, I think it would have, I think I certainly can have a conversation with Doug Cottonward and the Controller's Office about his thoughts to try to gain a little more insight from him on whether he thought that's been done anywhere else.
Our lifetime license account.
To an outside fund. Yeah. Pano's good at.
Yeah.
twisting arms over
Yeah.
this.
There are ways.
I mean, this would be the time, I mean, if there's another legislative option, I mean, I think, we should think about it sooner rather than later. We have a supplemental budget coming up next year that we can put some language in if there's a possibility of being able to move it someplace else. We should be able to get 5% of this market.
I think so. So how about we get together? So that's that office specialist 2 position, and hopefully this will help with the backlog that Commissioner Kelleher was referencing. We got a great field of applicants. We're going to be interviewing 8 or 9 over Thursday and Friday of this week. Some of them are longtime state employees who know the game and know accounting systems, and it would be great to have move in. Others are out of state government. We did get a paralegal or 2 in the mix, so it's a good crop of applicants, and I think that'll help out a lot in moving due diligence off the desks of project managers and hopefully clarify some of the coding puzzle that I never quite figured out in my short tenure here. So that's that. We'll probably by mid-December, I guess, based on HR's process, award that position. That would be my hope. Board materials, digital versus hard copies.
Yes, did you just add that?
That's nice. That's nice. I expect this conversation to be needed.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, the SharePoint thing obviously has issues. We don't want to have like 40 attachments on each one. There's probably technologies out there, but I mostly want to hear the preference of the board members.
And could I say too, that I hear that the LUPSI board members each get a laptop and all the materials are provided digitally. How about that?
Oh,
I know.
There you go.
So I hear this.
Yeah, I like the SharePoint and sending as much as you can. I end up throwing away any of the hard copies. I created, a file in a directory and I can find stuff instead of, I don't mind people having hard copy, but I could care less.
Let's go right around the table. Roger.
I prefer the hard copy, so within limitations.
Right.
Of attachments.
hard copy.
Yeah, I mean, look at this thing that I've got. Tabs and everything.
How much time did you spend doing that?
I asked my assistant if he could print off the attachments, and I hadn't opened any of them. I didn't realize it was this, and I had this 15 minutes later. Yeah, so she whipped her up, so.
Yeah.
My assistant doesn't exist.
The LUPSI board members get assistance too.
I don't know. I kind of doubt it.
I like for everything I need in my life to be accessible right here.
Yeah.
And so that I would prefer digital copies, but I will say I did send an email just to see if we can work out the Wi-Fi issues. If we get like a dedicated open Wi-Fi for all of our conference rooms, and
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to
Yeah.
navigate, but
Public Wi-Fi in these buildings, so in places it works great, in other places it's just terrible.
paperless.
I'm happy to go electronic if it works. And so we can't be in a room where we can have Wi-Fi if we need our individual accounts. I mean, all those things need to be figured out. The other thing I would say about SharePoint is, because it's one big thing, I found myself continually trying to scroll down. So
Right,
I would
that's
prefer to
a
have
challenge.
different tabs, but electronic tabs
Yeah.
that I can get into each item on the agenda. And it probably would still be nice to have paper copies of the agenda, and then I could refer to the tabs on my or my iPad.
I didn't think the SharePoint was as clear as it could be, when I needed to go back and find an appraisal or whatever, and it took a little more time. I think it could be a little more user friendly.
Yeah, I was just going to offer, I think I agree that SharePoint could be way more user friendly. And there are a few tricks that we have learned during our time messing around that we'd be happy to share if that would be helpful. And I think the other thing I also felt with a PDF it's difficult to view a PDF in SharePoint because you don't have the sections. But if you were to download it and open it on your computer using Adobe, you would have those sections. So I think there are tricks that could make it a little more user friendly.
Myers.
Well, we've been using the SharePoint with the AOC and I've gotten used to it. I'm fine with it. But the issues with the Wi-Fi, I'm kind of envisioning when we have all these projects on SharePoint, we come to our meeting and all of a sudden the Wi-Fi blows up. Here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I know for some commission and council meetings, everything's electronic and I'm used to it and I've got my laptop in front of me and sometimes a laptop and an iPad in front of me.
I have been downloading documents. And
Right.
just-
Yeah, but that was key with SharePoint to go there and get them on your laptop, and then you don't have to worry about having Wi-Fi.
So it looks like Roger Burley and I are the only two on the board that are supporters of the main forest products in there.
What about Mac and Kathy?
Man, oh, that's right, Mac and Catherine.
I prefer electronic.
So I'm a hybrid. I like electronic, but then I'll go and print out. Like I prefer to have the applications in paper
Yeah.
so I can spread them out, and I like to go back and highlight and make notes on the physical hard copy. And I find myself looking at an electronic screen so much that when there's that much material, I just like to also support the forest industry. But so I do a hybrid. I print out what I need from the packets. I had problems accessing the SharePoint, but that was just accessibility on my end. And I ended up being able to get the PDFs and work that way off of them. But the applications themselves, I do prefer, but I can print those out and I can continue to do so on that. Thank you.
Okay. It's like you and I'm probably more in line with Catherine. I'm kind of hybrid. I look at stuff and download
Go
stuff.
that way too.
You think you'd be all right doing that? So if that's the case, then we would stay wireless and then we print what we need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Board slides, I know in previous, maybe a year ago, board slides were emailed out a day or two in advance. Is that a practice that the board would like to continue, or are you comfortable with seeing the slides the day of the meeting?
I hardly ever look at the slides before they're presented. So I look at the materials.
And we are often adjusting them the night before, so. just so you know.
Matt, Catherine, you okay with, moving away from the slides? Okay, good. Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Jason just noted, the workbook we just approved says to applicants, they only need to submit one hard copy. Are we good with that? Understanding, we staff understand there could be a couple people who need paper. Is that still okay?
Yeah, I mean, the applicants get a lot of money from us, so I'm a little, I mean, I understand it's probably a pain in the butt to make those copies, but then again.
We just need to know whether we need to change that to
Yeah.
3 copies or what
Yes,
we
I
need
mean, If
to.
we're moving away from SharePoint, I mean, moving towards SharePoint and continuing to stay with that, and probably we don't need more. But I'll look to the board.
Well, as long as the electronic copy, I guess the staff is careful to make sure it's in a readable format
Yeah.
and can have it to get to things and.
We have do we have what's the word I'm looking for? A description of how we want that application to come in an electronic format, so it is easy to navigate?
We
Would you
do,
say
but
PDF?
we say
Yeah.
that, but what we get is a mix. We get, some people send us like a single PDF that is exactly the same as the hard copy. And that's relatively easy to navigate, except that you're scrolling through a 100-page PDF.
Right.
Some people send us 50 attachments.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
no organization at all, so.
We could, in one of our workshop tutorials, like say, hey, here's how you put together a PDF that you can use. I don't know.
About, hey, you know, if you really want the board to be able to navigate your proposal very easily, you should do this.
That's right.
Instead of making them,
Yeah,
yeah.
a dense inert object that you have to, yeah.
I mean, we wanna make sure that, you know, if we're gonna move away from hard copies, that what we do get is in a very usable format.
Yeah. You can make a table of contents that links, so you jump.
Yeah, that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Or even have it into an OCR. So that you can actually specifically look for any or specific.
Yeah.
It's sort of like putting it in the workbook that you must have a linkable table, but is it a good balance for you all if we say to applicants as we're preparing them, this is a better way, you know, to present your proposal? Have a linkable, have links, be able to navigate within the document.
A linkable table of contents into those areas or into the specific areas is a really great idea. I mean, I don't get those often, but when I do, they're very user friendly.
It seems to me that we're trying to accommodate their interests and not preparing, you know, such a large volume of copies. So for us to be a little more forthcoming with the format that we would like, give them the option. You can still give us hard copies if that's what you prefer, but if you want to go electronic, this is the format that would suffice for our board members. The other thing, I still would like the paper copies of the scoring sheets.
Yeah, because chicken scratch up and down.
Try to play on my.
Are we helping some of the smaller trusts, smaller applicants with filling out the application and so forth? I wonder, sometimes it seems like the experienced people have got it down pat, they've got templates, they've got just changing their names, but maybe some of the smaller entities that we're dealing with, not so much. Are you guys available, or do you routinely provide help that way?
Think. We answer questions, but we try to stay away from writing people's applications for them.
Definitely. I know that if someone sends an application, we are gonna, or an LOI or a proposal, we're gonna look at it. And we have offered critiques like, hey, you need a couple photos in here. This is a bunch of, you know, we definitely give that kind of feedback. I think that's fair to say, right?
Part of our completeness review too.
Yeah, part of our completeness review and suggestions for how to make it better from a, somehow not writing the proposal for them, but like, you know, that, is that?
Where are the limitations? Yeah. Okay,
If I could jump in.
Matt, go ahead.
I agree with the point just made. I am concerned about the smaller land trusts, and for that reason, I would suggest that, you know, this idea of a table of contents that's linked and everything, I think it's fine to suggest that, but I would not want to require it, given the technical capabilities of the smaller land trust might be limited. And back to a point that I think it might have been Barbara who suggested, well, we'll let them decide whether to send in a dozen hard copies or electronic. I actually don't want to get a mix of hard copies and electronic copies. That would be quite confusing for me. So I'm not sure I would give that option.
I agree with Mac on that. I think we need to be consistent. Or what's the board's feelings about being highly suggestive to putting together instead of ordering that type of submission?
We suggest.
Just, we, you know, highly, okay, perfect, okay.
We may be underestimating smaller land trusts. They may have younger, hipper people who this is second nature for, so.
It's just perfect. I did see on to staff, but I saw the chat light up. I think somebody may have said something in on this.
Bethany was commenting that the DSAs also help and offer suggestions and tweaks.
Okay, perfect.
So back to the smaller, do we, should maybe know this question, do we have a template? I mean, so that if they said we're floundering a little, you can pop them a template almost to fill in the blanks thing?
The template per se, although, so two things. One, the proposal instruction section of the workbook essentially maps directly to these should be these section headings in your proposal. So if you follow that template very, very carefully, you'll be fine. The other thing we do, yes, I forgot what I think we do is I forgot what I was going to say.
It's just that some of the bigger organizations, some recent ones we've seen, have done a real good job, as you just described, that you better make reference to what's in our template, but maybe actually having something available.
I remember the other thing we do is if anybody asks, we are happy to send them one of our favorite proposals from the previous round.
Yes. Yeah, we do
We
that.
don't, so it's not a template, but we can sort of say, here's one that we really liked.
Am I correct that previously, not only have they submitted the hard copies, but they've also, all of them have submitted an electronic copy for us? That's all, that's our
The
historic.
format has been absolutely all over the place.
Yeah.
But they're used to that
Yes.
requirement.
Yes.
So.
And they're
okay.
lobbying hard for it, if it makes any difference. They really, really want to be able to
Yeah.
do it that way. Yeah. And I also would just chime in to say that we have the software to combine. If we receive multiple PDFs, it's not a huge burden for us to quickly combine documents to make them easier for the board to read.
One more,
Last one.
last one. If a small entity did come forward and say we're lost, do you ever actually make referrals to consultants and people that are in this process?
Give him a kickback. He looked at that for a second. On the payroll.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, but do we ever do anything like that? Do you guys know?
They can reach out to the land.
Yeah.
trust alliance.
Main Land Trust Network is where I refer to.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're happy to help, or
Yeah.
we work with you to do a session or something like that.
Be great.
Could I have one final word?
Yes, sir, Matt.
So Barbara's remark about, well, the young staff will be able to figure this out reminds me of a land trust, the Orono Land Trust, which is run by a bunch of retired humane professors. People like Bucky Owen, who many of you know. And the last time I discussed LMF with Bucky, who served on this group twice, they said they're not bothering with LMF applications anymore. They're too complicated.
I think that's.
That's a whole other discussion.
They'll be under Laura's direction.
I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I think we thoroughly discussed the board materials and how, and it'll be up to Roger and I to figure it out. Right? Okay. I think that wraps up this meeting. I do want to, before we end, say we are looking for another AOC member shortly. I did have a conversation with, I won't name who it was, but Jim wants off.
9 years.
He's done it for 9 years. He did it professionally for how many years? Yeah, and was looking to potentially move off the AOC. He said he would continue to serve until we find a replacement. So I just wanted to highlight that to the board. And maybe this will be the problem of the next director.
The pays really well,
Robert.
Yeah.
and you don't have to spend much time. So.
Yeah, and Robert is termed out, but we are, I'm continually dragging my feet because he serves until replaced, so. We may have some shifting around on the AOC, that we'll need to consider, so I wanted to just bring that up to the board. This is a group that is obviously, as you know, very, very active, and is doing a hell of a job. So you.
We're aware that opting out was an option.
It's not for either.
Missed the boat.
Okay, so with that, and lastly, just to echo Commissioner Beal's sentiments, I appreciate your short time here, Steve, but you certainly, it's been a career dealing with land and land conservation, and I congratulate you on your new position and wish you luck, and I'm sure we'll see you a lot more.
Thanks.
And Laura, just stay out of my kitchen. I know how excited Laura is because she set a land speed record filing her application for the state system for this position. So we look forward to working with you closely and having you up front of the table. So
Very much. Thank
with
you.
that, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Move.
Great. Seeing no objections. Thanks, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.